so that others who aren't able to attend today, it'll be shared privately on our YouTube channel, so that folks that can't join us live today for our conversation will still be able to hear about your ministry and the work that you do, which is what I've learned, what I've heard about it is very exciting. I am excited to learn more. So how about I turn it right over to you, Bruce and Emily, can you introduce yourselves and then launch into your program, but let's leave some time for some questions and conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. So wonderful to meet all of you. My role at Administer Justice is, let's see if I can get it right, Director of Development and Communications. But what I get to do is really just talk with church leaders, people who are exploring our model and share what we do, so people can discern if it's a good fit for them. My background before I joined Administer Justice was pastor's wife. So for 20 years plus, I was super involved in church ministry. And so I get really excited about how our model makes it really easy for churches to provide access to justice in their communities. So I'm going to bring up my screen and share some of the awesome stuff. And just so you know, I'll walk through after Bruce introduces himself and gives the background. I'm going to walk through why we need to provide access to justice, how our model works, and then why we think churches are the best place to be doing that. And then, as Kathy said, we'll have time for Q&A at the end of that. So before I have Bruce come share, I just want to call your attention to our logo, because it's something I really love and it helps give a great visual to something that we believe strongly in. So if you notice, the base of the torch is formed by 3 hands, and that's because we believe that in God's kingdom, no one does justice alone and no one should face injustice alone. And then those hands are different sizes and different colors because we believe it takes a diverse team. It takes church leaders, it takes attorneys, it takes people from all walks of life to achieve our mission. And it also takes churches from all different backgrounds, big churches, small churches. So I love the diversity because, again, that reflects God's kingdom, which is full of people with many different gifts. And then I love the story of how AJ got its start. So I'm going to have Bruce share that now.
Well, thank you, Emily. Yes, so I love the church also. I'm a pastor's kid. So my father, as you might imagine, for my age, is well retired for many years, but for more than 40 years, he served in ministry. And I love the church, grew up in the church, but it has always disturbed me as a lawyer, I'm an attorney, that the church that was best known and demonstrated to the world the love of Christ when we saved education during the dark ages and we established the first universities. We wanted people to have knowledge and to be able to read God's word, and we did that. And we established, as Kathy's already said, the first hospitals. We were the leaders. We set up leper colonies. We went into plagues and served people, and the world watched, and the world was changed because of our love. And yet, the second most prominent theme in Scripture, justice for the poor and vulnerable, especially as that relates to the law, because it has to. The law invades everything. We have been entirely absent as a church, with almost literally no churches being involved in that area for the first more than 200 years of American history. I am called by God to change that, to come alongside churches through Administer Justice and what we do here, to invite churches and the people of God to truly do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with neighbors in need. Now, I had to come by this. I'm being a little bit critical of the church that I deeply love, but I'm going to be more critical of lawyers because we have an access to justice gap, because frankly, we're super expensive. 1 in 3 people simply cannot afford us. And that was true in my career. And honestly, even though I knew that people needed help, I didn't do much of it. I mean, I had a very successful private law practice, had multiple offices across the area, was the senior partner, argued cases all the way to the United States Supreme Court, was doing exceptionally well. And yet I paid little attention to the needs of the poor. I was doing good work. I was writing nice checks to ministries, but I was not doing much with my time. And God called me to leave all of that, to sell it all, to go serve the poor, to start Administer Justice more than 20 years ago. at a church, and we still work with churches. That's where we work out of. But as I entered into that space, I honestly didn't know what I was doing, because I practiced in legal areas that were not those that were encountered by low-income individuals. And so I had a lot to learn. And fortunately, God sent me great teachers. One of my first great teachers was a man named Jonathan, who was homeless in the suburbs of Chicago. He was just in a Jewel food store trying to keep warm in our brutal winters, but they don't like homeless people hanging around. And so they charged him with a crime of trespassing, threw him in jail. He gets out. A church that knew about Administer Justice referred him to me. And I asked Jonathan if I could take him to breakfast before court, because I'd never sat down with anybody who was homeless before. I didn't understand the homeless. If you'd asked me at the time, I would have said they were all mentally ill. I would have said they were all drug addicted or alcohol addicted, and that they chose to live homeless because that was Hollywood's view, and that was the only view I had. But nothing could be further from the truth. As I sat with Jonathan and just listened to his story, he told me he had a master's degree. He was incredibly intelligent, had a great paying job, but in a merger with a larger company, those mid-level managers were let go. And he assumed he'd find work. I'll find another job. So he didn't tell his wife. He would get dressed up like he was going off to work because he'd go out looking for work, but jobs were hard to come by, and they didn't come. And the longer it took, the more their savings was depleted. Then lawsuits followed for failure to pay different bills. Then the foreclosure followed. And he came home one day and just found the house empty because his wife and children were gone. And now he'd not heard from them in years. And so after the foreclosure happened, he did find himself on the streets. He did turn to alcohol as just a way to numb the pain. But he said in the suburbs of Chicago, people didn't want to look at him. They just would refuse to look him in the eye, to see him in any way. And he just felt so rejected. And all I could think of, friends, as I looked into the face of my new friend, was I saw the face of Jesus. Because Jesus was a man who was despised and rejected by men. He was a man of sorrows and suffering, and we esteemed him not. He was a man, the Bible tells me, had no place to lay his head. And as I talked to Jonathan about Jesus' love for him, how Jesus saw him, how Jesus cared about him, understood his circumstances, had a plan for his life, a plan to prosper him and not to harm him, a plan to give him hope and a future. As we just talked about that and dialogue back and forth, Jonathan that day prayed to accept Jesus Christ as his Savior. I went to court. I got those charges dismissed. I got him plugged into the local church, where he was able to join a Celebrate Recovery program, get off alcohol, join a men's group where he was able to find work and become a vital part of that church ministry. And I recognized the power that an attorney could have if they would just set aside a small amount of time, sit alongside a neighbor in need, cut through the clutter and confusion that overwhelms anyone, yourself included. If you've ever read a legal document or if you've ever received a summons, it can be very overwhelming. But having a special skill to cut through all that legalese, to be able to understand the laws and to be able to help someone with a plan to move forward, and to include in that plan just demonstrating the love of Jesus through the power of a team, has transformed more than 90,000 lives over the years. We continuously see people come to faith in Christ, have their faith restored, or just have their faith in the church or the people of God restored as they see a different image than what the media would portray of us. And so it's been a great blessing. This year alone, we've added 14 churches that have stepped forward that are opening new gospel justice centers. We believe and are trusting God to see 300 that would more than double the number that have ever existed in the United States by the end of 2025. And it is our grand vision to see people stepping up so that 1,000 gospel justice centers exist from coast to coast, transforming lives in the name of Christ. And friends, it is a joy and a privilege to come alongside the church at no cost in a simple model to help you love neighbors in a unique way. Others are not doing legal ministry. It is desperately needed to have incredible kingdom impact. And I don't know how God may move this conversation forward. But I pray this is just the start of a continuing conversation. And I look forward to walking together with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. We just got a question from David. How many centers do we currently have in Illinois? And I feel like you always have the best and latest stats on that. Do you have that number?
28 in Illinois.
There we go. 28. Great. Our office is located right across from a Jewel grocery store, which is where Jonathan, I think, was told he couldn't be. And so I feel like I'm reminded all the time of Jonathan's story, and I love hearing it. So thank you so much, Bruce. You may find as you talk to people that they might say, doesn't everyone have the right to a free attorney? Because I think people hear that in movies and they just assume that, why do we need to provide an attorney if they have it? Well, it's only true if you're accused of a crime. If you are the victim of a crime, then you're left to fend for yourself. That's the criminal justice system. In the civil justice system, which we're probably more familiar with, things like healthcare, housing, family law, veterans affairs, there are 150 million new cases every year, and the majority of those cases are not going to require representation in court, but they do require some level of legal expertise or skill. So our law has many wonderful protections for the vulnerable. I'm thankful for that. We want to advocate for that, but often you can't access those protections if you don't know the law. Just one example of that is veterans who are completing claim forms to receive benefits that were owed to them. If they just had the help of a lawyer in completing the form, they were 144% more successful than if they did it themselves. So that simple act of just having input and guidance from a lawyer can have like life-changing effects. But as Bruce said, and we all know, lawyers are expensive. 1 out of every 3 Americans can't afford a lawyer. So statistically, there are about 46 million people every year who are turned away from legal aid. These are people who qualify for legal aid based on their income level, turned away because there's just not enough lawyers providing that kind of service. And to give you a mental picture of that, if you picture Soldier Field filled to capacity, so 60,000 people, in the stadium, every single one of them with some legal concern that they need help with. And then you picture 6 attorneys walking into the stadium. That's about the reality of the big gap that Bruce talked about. So there's just no way. We've got all these people who've got legal questions who can't get the answers they need, and that leads to stress and all sorts of other problems. On a global scale, just to be a little bit more horrifying, every year, the World Justice Project ranks the countries of the world in terms of providing affordable access to justice. And we just got the latest stats. So is it 134 countries or 136, something like that? And we ranked 126, I believe, out of the countries in terms of providing affordable access to justice. So almost dead last, definitely last for first world countries. We just do a terrible job. So it's clear there's a problem. The solution is what we are addressing through our vision of 1,000 gospel justice centers. And in order to launch those centers, then we need at least 1,000 attorneys who will volunteer just once a month. So our model is a once a month, usually on a Saturday morning, that you open your doors for 4 hours. Clients can come in and get the advice from a lawyer. So we need at least 1,000 attorneys to serve at those 1,000 centers that we want to see happen. But lawyers are not easy to come by. They make up less, I think around 0.4% of the population, and Christian attorneys an even smaller percentage. I don't know if we have any attorneys besides Bruce on the Zoom today, but what's beautiful about our model is, first of all, we're going to make it really easy for attorneys to get involved. We know they're busy, and I'll talk more about that in a second, but we also have lots of roles for non-attorneys. And so if you look at the picture here, the grid, we've got 9 roles on our Justice Center teams. So every center needs an attorney. Every center needs a justice champion like Colleen. She's the one in the picture there in the pink pants. That's your point person for the center. So this is the best thing for pastors. They identify a justice champion, and then that champion is the one who's going to recruit the rest of the team and be the point person to get it started. So every center will have an attorney, every center will have a champion, and every center will have a client intake specialist. And I'm specifying the ones you need to have because some centers might double up on roles, or you might not need an interpreter. And if you notice, there's 5 people in the picture and there's 9 roles. When Colleen launched her center, there were 5 people on her team. So it can be launched with a really small team. But your client intake specialist is going to be the first person that the client meets when they come to the center. That's the person who takes all the information related to their legal situation, puts it into our database so that later the attorney, when they sit down, they have all the information they need to talk about the situation with them. They also collect the $30 copay that we charge from clients. And we do this as a way of inviting the clients into the process. So we're doing justice with them, not for them. And then that $30 allows the centers to be self-sustaining long-term. So there is no cost to the church. Again, we're trying to make it easy for churches and easy for attorneys. So then after they meet with the client intake specialist, they will sit down with the attorney. And this is some of what they would expect during that time. The client is not going to be getting representation in court. They're going to be getting legal advice or coaching on their situation. So that's going to start with some questions about their situation. And then it's going to be laying out some options and helping to decide which option is the best for them. And then laying out next steps for once they've decided on the option, addressing their legal situation and making sure they have all the resources they need to take those steps. So it's this lovely, empowering legal coaching that takes place so that they get the answers they need and can move forward. Now, you might wonder, why don't you just have attorneys do this work? Why do you have to have a whole team of people? And there's really 3 reasons for that. The first is that we've already talked about attorneys are busy, but you bring kind of vulnerable clients into the situation, and there's just a lot more heaviness to it. So they are kind of playing social worker. They're doing all the administrative stuff. They might be doing some community outreach and follow-up. It just becomes overwhelming. So we see attorneys burn out when they are the sole person providing that aid. We don't want that to happen. The second reason is, as Bruce was reminding us, God calls the whole church to seek justice, and he gifts us all in unique ways to do that. And so it pleases him when we all are using our gifts in order to do that. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, our vision is to see lives transformed. And transformed lives are not going to happen just with legal help. We know that's going to require more. It's going to require the hope of God's love. And so you need that team to communicate that hope and share that good news with them. So these are some of the faces of our clients over the last 21 years. They don't look that much different than you or I. These aren't people who've just made terrible choices as much as it is people like Jonathan who suffered a job loss or a serious health issue, maybe abandonment or fraud. And so they're carrying really heavy burdens. They're worried maybe they're going to be evicted from their home or lose custody of their kids. And so while, yes, they need the legal advice, and we will provide that, they've got a lot going on emotionally, and that often has ripple effects in their life. So they need someone like our client advocate, Janelle, just to look them in the eye, to tell them that they matter to God, that they matter to us, that God is not absent, he's present, he has a plan for them through Jesus to give them hope in the future. And when you look someone in the eye and tell them that and can encourage them, it really does give hope. And that is what can lead to transformation. So after they meet with the attorney, then they sit down with the client advocate. And first, they're just going to make sure they understood what was communicated by the attorney, but then they will explore what else is going on in their life, see if they can refer them to other agencies, maybe in the community that can help address some of those situations. Or perhaps there's a service that your church provides that they could refer them to. And then they always offer to pray for the client. 99% of the time that is warmly received. And truly, it is often in those times of prayer where true words are being spoken over them that you can physically begin to see the burden lift, and very often tears as well. So here you can see all the roles again. It's our privilege to train all of these roles through our online AJ Academy. And that's just another way we try to make it really easy for people to get started. So it's all on-demand courses that people can start and stop at any time. So once a person is like, yes, I'm interested in the community advocate role, they can get started and learn more about that role. It's also a way for people to kind of learn about what the roles involve and make a decision in terms of whether or not they want to get involved. So I want to share just a video of one of our centers in Chicago, and so you can kind of see how it operates and hear one client story.
Reverend Alvin C. Bibb Sr., I'm the Community and Faith Engagement Officer for Together Chicago, and also our Gospel Justice Centers, the role that I play in launching these very exciting Gospel Justice Centers in strategic communities across the city of Chicago. On a Wednesday morning, my colleagues and I were at a community meeting, and all of a sudden, one of our leaders actually looked out the window, and there was this young lady that was trying to get everybody's attention. We discovered she was on the verge of being evicted from her home with her grandchild and had no idea exactly how to address her situation. We realized that she needed some legal assistance. Well, it just so happened that particular weekend, the Jesus Word Center Gospel Justice Center doors were open to greet and serve clients. It was quite easy for us to say, look, here's some contact information. We will love to have you, and we will make sure that you have a consultation with one of our wonderful attorneys to hear and discern exactly how your need can be addressed and serve you in a very powerful way. After the interaction with the young woman, it was quite clear that a direct call into the senior pastor needed to happen.
When I see Alvin's name, I always pick up, because Alvin is passionate about justice. He's passionate about what I'm passionate about. And so I picked up. He gave me the heads up that a young lady would be coming. And so she came, and we could see she was broken. We could see that, a little afraid because we're strangers to her. But our team know that this is what we're here for. So we made her feel welcome. And then Rosina, who's our advocate, took her to the side and began to minister to her. And then our attorney came.
My interaction at that point is just, hi, my name is Rosina. I'm so glad you came today. I'm just looking forward to you having a good session with the attorney. And when you're finished, you're going to come back to me. And then we're going to talk about how everything went. And then I try to make it a smooth transition to coming up and seeing the attorney.
After our client met with our attorney, there was a recommendation made that she needed to have additional legal counsel outside of that particular setting. Well, in that moment, our client had a look of anxiety and concern about that because she was already facing financial crisis in regards to her potential eviction situation, and to have additional financial needs surface was just probably far-reaching for her.
When she came back down from the attorney, I just simply asked if I can pray with her. I asked if she happened to know the Lord Jesus as Savior. When I asked that question, she just began to cry. And so I just got up and I just hugged her because I could see that she really felt the disconnect. And I just asked, is that something you want to do? And she said yes. And so we prayed together and we cried together. You could just feel the unloading of what she was carrying. It was at that moment that I realized it was even more serious than the legal matter.
And that's when God blessed this entire situation with an anonymous donor to support our client that we didn't know was coming, she didn't know was coming, but God blessed this situation. She was able to not only have received this financial gift, but she was also able to spend time with additional legal counsel that was able to hear her case, go before the judge, get on the solution side, and prevent her from being evicted from her residence on the near west side of Chicago.
This young lady came in broken, and you could see the brokenness. You could feel it, but she left restored. And we did the possible, and Christ did the impossible for her.
This is why we're partnering with Administer Justice, because we believe in the movement and the mission of this organization, There's more clients, there's more communities, there's more cities. Our nation is in crisis. Our nation desperately needs gospel justice centers in cities all across North America.
Being with Administer Justice is another level of opportunity to serve. I'm just so proud that our church does that.
That is a perfect segue to talk about why we want to have this ministry operate out of churches. So Brian Fickert, I don't know if any of you have read him, but he's done a lot of work to make poverty alleviation ministries more effective. And he reminds us that the local church is Grand Central Station in God's kingdom. That is where everything happens. It's where we find wholeness and healing, salvation, family, home. And so if that's true, if that's what's necessary for transformation, and Bruce reminded us, God clearly calls the church to seek justice, then you would think that the church would be really leading the way in this space. But the reality is that we're not at all. Less than 0.1% of the 384,000 churches in America are doing any kind of legal aid ministry. And this is where we just see a huge opportunity. We know that culture increasingly is viewing the church as apathetic to the needs of the vulnerable. And we have this beautiful opportunity to change that perception by providing this really simple service. By saying, hey, our church is going to open its doors once a month on a Saturday for 3 or 4 hours. We've got a great volunteer team. You can bring your legal questions and get the advice that you need. And so just like we have made it, provided all the training and stuff for our volunteers and our attorneys, we try to make it simple for pastors, for churches to get started by saying, here, we've got a whole model for you. It's kind of plug and play. And so that is really our goal. You know, Bruce talked about growing up, son of a pastor. I'm married to a pastor. We want to make it easy for pastors. We know how busy they are. Talked with some pastors down in Texas, and one of them basically said, we'd be negligent to not do this when you've made it so easy. And another pastor I talked to last week said, this is a no-brainer. So I'm not trying to say to you, because I know there's a million ministries and you have to decide where to get involved. But I want to say that we're trying to make it as simple as possible for you to say yes if it is what God puts on your heart. So just to really quickly touch on those other roles there, community advocate is a really important role. They're the ones who are going to get out in the community, find out what services are available. So as clients have needs, you can refer them to those agencies, and also so they know you exist as a legal aid ministry and can refer clients to you. The prayer champions enlist the support of the host church to be praying for clients' needs. They also write out these beautiful prayer cards that are given to the clients just to encourage them. And then our hospitality specialists try to make the place as homey as possible when they come, so they don't feel like they're going to a cold, sterile law office, but they're coming to a place that's warm and friendly. And care like that by the whole team leads to just amazing feedback from clients. So Bruce and I see these come in all the time over the weekends while they're meeting. The feedback comes in. And so this is just one example, but really over and over again, we just hear the difference it's making in the lives of clients. And that's so encouraging because it's why we're doing what we're doing. So I just want you to imagine just for a second, and maybe this is right now kind of the reality in your community, but imagine if Administer Justice doesn't exist and people like Jonathan or the woman in the video have major legal issues and can't get the help they need, and they also can't hear about Jesus. Jonathan would have stayed on the streets, right? The woman would have been evicted with her autistic grandson. These are the realities if you think of that 46 million figure, and even a fraction of those that happening to is really tragic. It also means that people continue to view the church in kind of a negative way. But what I really want you to imagine is if in every community there was a church opening its doors to provide legal aid, what that would mean for the vulnerable in that community, but what it also means for just changing the perception of churches, what it allows pastors to do in terms of making an impact in their community. So that's our vision. Our vision is to see 1,000 gospel justice centers across the country that are transforming lives in the name of Christ. We know in order to get there, then we're going to need at least 1,000 churches that will step forward and host centers. torch lighters to fund each of those centers. So it costs $5,000 to launch a center, and we invite donors to give to that work so that churches don't have that burden. At least 1,000 attorneys, as I said, to volunteer, 1,000 people like Colleen, that justice champion, who will be the point person, and then 5,000 to 10,000 volunteers to serve. And then beyond that, you are now deputized. You now know about Administer Justice. So we encourage you, whether or not it's something you're going to get involved with at your church, to tell other people about it. If you know attorneys that might want to get involved in work like this, please let them know about our organization. Or if you know other churches that you think in other states that might want to get involved, we would love for you to spread the word, because if we do that, we can empower over 100,000 clients every year with that hope of God's love and the hope of a lawyer through the home of the church. And I just want to close. You haven't met Penny. She's in another one of our videos, but she's one of our first clients who then went on to be a volunteer and now serves on the team with Bruce and I on staff. And you can just see joy. And we like to say, and you know this because you've been involved with ministry, that when you are about God's, advancing God's kingdom, you experience joy. And so we know this is what's fueled Bruce over the years to stay with this work, just the joy that comes from doing this kind of work. So we're going to open it up to Q&A. I'm going to drop a few links in the chat, just some things that will be helpful for you. And one of those things is a link to my calendar. So if after this, you want to book a time just to ask some more questions, then you'll have a way to do that.
So let me jump in on the front of that too. Thank you, Emily and Bruce. Our church is not involved yet in Monee with this, but only because when it first came up last year, we were in between pastors and wanted to wait until we got a pastor. And then in the meantime, another one of the churches in Monee decided they were going to do the program and are indeed doing the program. Second Place Church, Emily, in Monee. And so the reason I mention this is because there's another way we can get involved, or there's a lot of the people on this call are from rural churches, and that is you don't have to do it by yourself. You can join or yoke with another church and work on together. And that way you can provide or get volunteers and programs. So we're kind of the backup for this church if they need a place to meet, because they're in the process of building an office for this program. We said, well, you can start with our church if necessary. You can use our building. And we also are looking at, and I will probably be one of the volunteers that helps wherever they end up doing this. So there's a number of ways we can do this. So we don't want to say we're a small rural church, we can't do it, I guess is what I'm saying. I think this is that important.
Yeah, I will add to that. So one of our other coworkers, her church has about 30 people in attendance. It's a small church, and they're launching with a team coming up like in the next week or two. You can launch with a small team is basically my point. Some of our best teams are from really small churches. So it doesn't need to be a huge church, but I think that's a great point as well, David, is that it's a great way to partner with other churches in your area in order to provide this.
And the segue that I'll add to that, David, is that Judy, who is going through credentialing with the UCC, recruits attorneys. That's one of her roles. The advantage that we learned from the pandemic, the opportunity that God opened up, is that I can have an attorney here in Elgin. We've been in Illinois for a long time, so I know lots of lawyers in Illinois. They can go to one of those rural areas because they can be there by Zoom. You need a care team. We want that team that wraps their arms around the person, that literally hugs them, as you saw in the video, if allowed. But you can bring in the professional that maybe doesn't exist in your community, because frankly, 40% of the counties in America are legal deserts, and that's mostly rural areas. But we can bring a lawyer from here or there. So don't let the lack of a lawyer stop you either. If God's calling you, he will make a way, and we would love to be part of that.
Thank you. What questions do we have from the gathered community? Can you guys picture doing this in your church? Is this something that would be interesting or exciting to you? Phil?
Yeah, I was a little bit late getting on. How do you say yes?
Well, one thing I will say, because we don't have any of your contact information, but if you want us to follow up with you, you could drop maybe an email address in the chat and we can copy and paste it out of there. But saying yes looks like identifying a justice champion. So we want to get it off the pastor's plate so that it can move forward, because we know that pastors are busy. So it might look like you inviting Bruce and I to present something to maybe a ministry team at your church, or it might be you saying to the congregation, here's something we're exploring. If you're interested in learning more, come at this date and time and we do a Zoom to share more about it. And you see if someone steps forward, and if they do, then you go, okay, it looks like we are able to move forward with this. But the really first step in launching one is to sign articles of association with us, which says we're gonna, I didn't explain that beautifully, but the justice champion is the one who signs it. That's why I wanted to get there. And the articles of association, when you sign them, allow us to cover your center under our liability and malpractice insurance. So it's kind of like saying, yes, we're committed to doing this, and us just saying, yes, we will be able to cover you. And it allows all the volunteers then to access our database. So identifying the justice champion is like the really key thing for you to do, and different churches go about that in different ways. It might be word of mouth, it might be an all church invitation to learn more, but that would be kind of the way to move forward.
I'll just quickly jump in because I have my hand up. We are solidly a Christian church, so that's not an issue, but we work very much in an interfaith way in so many capacities in this community. Our food and more ministry is interfaith and has a number of congregations. So even though this is gospel justice, do you partner also with interfaith communities?
Anyone is welcome to come to a center, and the attorneys don't need to be Christian. They should be comfortable with the fact that it is operating out of that model, that we're inviting them into a place where we want to show them God's love. But
we love to work across the spectrum. So Deborah, for example, the attorney in the video, she's Jewish. And so the answer, so that's a good example. It's a small church in Lawndale. Again, probably 60 people that attend that church, and yet they have different things. And the attorney that literally met with this woman was a Jewish attorney. So we welcome different people. There's lots of ways. Your community cares about justice. So I'm certain the local rabbi, if you have one, would want to know about it, just like our local rabbi in Elgin wants to. There are other faith groups. Now, we're going to be located in the church. We do think that's important. So we don't locate in synagogues. They also have different things that they do, or mosque. But we work with across the spectrum because we want as many people to be helped as possible.
Thank you.
David, your hand is still up. Are you wanting to say something, or is it just not put down again?
You know me, I can always say something, but no, I just didn't put it down yet. I'll figure that out in a minute.
Catherine.
I was just curious, you might have mentioned it, but of course there's a lot of information that's flowing in there. Do you have an idea of what the average, and again, this may be a question you can't answer, what the average number of people that are served, if we make this commitment, we're going to be open on one Saturday a month, about how many people are normally served on a Saturday morning like that per session?
if it was full, you would have four clients seen. If you had one attorney, if you had more than one attorney, then it would be, times that number of attorneys. So 4 times however many attorneys are serving. Is that right, Bruce?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, that helps a lot, because that has some determination as to how many volunteers you're thinking you might need and what the intensity of the timeline and the engagements are. So, okay, thank you very much.
Other questions? Jim?
What percentage would be criminal cases versus civil cases? And how would the criminal cases be handled?
So most of our, Jim, I don't know you back, but most of our criminal cases fall more on the expungement side, sealing side. So people re-entering, trying to clear up records than they do on what you might think of like somebody charged with murder or some other kind of crime. Those individuals, because there's a public defender, we don't get involved with those. Those individuals that do not qualify for a public defender, so we do get involved in some petty offenses, smaller matters, but our majority are expungement and different things, and that's around 10%, but most of those are expungement issues.
Right. I was thinking, I have a friend who's a legal aid attorney out in West Virginia, and there's a fair number of even their eviction cases that need to go to court. And I assume that you would also have a fair number of those cases that might show up. And that would require, as in the case of, I think her name was Barbara, who required an attorney to deal with her eviction issues. And there luckily was a donor, guardian angel, who, stepped in at that particular point to provide the funds in order to get her the attorney that she would need to deal with that. I guess that leads me to say, so maybe there's a fundraising component. You have to have access to some funds that might, as in Barbara's case, a donor provided the attorney, that could be a companion piece that is oftentimes necessary in terms of that. Is my question clear?
Yes, it is clear, but and just to let you know that it's not as often as you would think. There are 150 million cases across the country, and only every year in the civil area, and only about 15 to 20% of those actually involve court. And so the vast majority, but those are legal aids exist to do that. So your friend, that's what they exist to do, and they operate like law offices. But what's totally missing in the legal realm is a health clinic, your neighborhood health clinic, where you can go, anybody can go and get answers and guidance. There's no such thing on the legal side. And so that's what we are, sort of that community health clinic. In the example, even of the video, that woman received $200. That was the amount. I know that's the numbers, but because all that was needed was for an attorney to be, who knew the area well and had some reputation, to make a call. They didn't even have to go to court because it was dismissed. And a lot of our attorneys will do that pro bono, and that's what's often all that's needed. I've handled lots of housing cases, and a lot of times if they're just doing something wrong and I get on a phone, that's it. Or if I write a letter, that's it. That's all that it takes. It's just rebalancing the power structure. So most of our cases fit in that category.
Okay, thank you.
A good conversation. Other questions? I have a little personal chat going here on the side, and question for those of you who are gathered. If we were to work as a conference to try to help support churches move this way, to sort of have a coordinated effort or even a goal within our conference to have so many churches sign on, become part of this, is there interest of those who are gathered here who are maybe just learning about this for the first time to have some more concerted effort around this? I see Phil says, yeah. Catherine and Roger, I see very mild head nods. Is that saying, yeah, that looks interesting?
It does. My reaction is in part based on the comment that I made earlier. I was in the Ministry of Justice and Witness for 9 years for the CMA, but currently Harriet is chair of that body, and I know the chair of the conference is a classmate of ours at seminary, Hank Fairman. And I think this is very much something that could be put on their agenda. If I were still involved in it, I certainly would jump on it.
Yeah, I was surprised when I found out about Administer Justice that we didn't have any more churches in Illinois involved, because to me, this is the biggest no-brainer in the history of whatever. Because we're a justice church, and it's not that hard to get involved in this. They're doing the job of finding the lawyers. They even help you with finding sponsors. And you know, we can grab 500 people very quickly to do a march if we want to next week. Why in the world can't we find a dozen churches who will help those people who don't have enough money to afford a lawyer, and yet are being evicted or being mistreated just because somebody else has a lawyer and is trying to take advantage of it? So to me, this is a huge justice issue that we ought to be talking about everywhere. That's just my 2 cents. I'm not an ordained pastor, so I have no standing in that regard to speak for anybody other than myself.
Yeah, we have a priesthood of all believers, though, David, here amongst us. So you have a voice for sure. Catherine.
Again, a lot of information, so you might have already mentioned this, but question, I know some of my own people in my congregation would be going, I wouldn't know how to do that, Reverend. I don't know where to start. I would mess this up, you know, whatever. What kind of training is available for those people who are choosing to be in that support team? Because clearly getting that support team set up is really, as you said, that's the essential first key to this. And you know, I know of some people just in general who would say, oh yeah, sure, I would do that, but I have no idea, you know, how to handle that. So
Yep, I just dropped the link to our AJ Academy in the chat. If you click on that, it shows every role but the Justice Champion, and you could look. So it's role-based training. They decide what role they're going to do, and then we train them all online. The Justice Champion, because it's a bigger role, has a couple like Zoom meetings with us to make sure they feel fully equipped. And then we do what's called a mock launch before you actually open, where you practice so everyone feels comfortable with the systems. Then the champion will debrief with our team to see if they, you know, if anything else is needed before you actually open your doors to clients. So
okay.
a lot of care to make sure whatever the background, you know, that people feel equipped. And part of it is another link I put. I know I threw a lot of links at you, but one is called What is a Gospel Justice Center? And it's just a one-pager that lists like what skills you would want for each role, so that at least you know, oh, I need administrative skills to do that. And that might not be best, or I need to be comfortable talking about heavy things or prayer, or so they can kind of find the role that suits their abilities and experiences. But yeah, the training is all done through those modules, and you can take a look if you're curious.
All right, because I would imagine not only knowing what to say, but some of the things not to say is probably crucial to having this be successful for both, just as a project, and successful for the people, to not have folks promising the moon and the stars and then, you know, finding out that that's really not feasible. So, okay, that would be crucial. Thank you.
So there are a lot of really good links in the chat. And for those of you who don't know how to save the chat, it's actually really easy. If you go down, if you open up the chat box, and where it says you can type a message here, on the far right-hand corner of that, there's a little spot that has ... And if you put your cursor over it, it says more. If you click on that, you have the choice to save chat, and that will save it into a text document that you can save, and you can access those all those links later at your convenience. Or you can scroll over, cut and paste, and put them someplace convenient for you too.
Yeah.
Emily, Bruce, do you have any final comments?
No, it is truly my hope. I mean, I'm a pastor now also. I went through, like those of you who are lay leaders in my denomination, we do the same thing, going through that kind of process. And I actually pastor a church presently. But I think this is just the greatest opportunity for the church to be known for what we are for. And I know the UCC, I've known the UCC for years, and I love that you are a church who cares about that and who wants to be known for what you are for versus what you are against. And you are for people, you are for the love of God, you are for demonstrating that. And I think this is another way, another vehicle, and a vehicle where there is real need that helps make that possible. And it is our role to simply come alongside you in your leadership, in your community. And we'd love to make that happen for anyone who wants to pursue us further.
Thank you. We're so appreciative of you being here. Oh, Ken, go ahead.
Just one last question, and either to Bruce or Emily. Is there any of these gospel centers in the Peoria area, Peoria, Bloomington?
Not yet. We've been waiting. So St. Paul Baptist Church has been about to commit for a few months now, and hopefully they will shortly. But other than that, no.
Okay, that's what I need. I know St. Paul Baptist, so this is something that we could probably work with there. Okay, thank you.
There is plenty of opportunity and surely plenty of need. So thank you, Bruce and Emily, for introducing us to Administer Justice. Next week is a busy week for pretty much everybody related to the church. So we will not have a Wednesday all conference chat next week. And you will all be in my prayers as you journey through Holy Week. David, I see your finger just a second. And the following week, we will be talking with Leslie Romali from about disaster relief topics. So come back in 2 weeks and we'll have a good conversation. David.
Yeah, in the last 2 years, I have never been on a call that Mark Binder didn't say something. Mark, are you okay?
He must be on.
Actually, I muted myself for once. Yeah, I'm fine, David.
Okay, just worried about you.
He's not sure how a legal clinic would go in the church, that the hardest church to find in Illinois.
I know.
Anyway, I want to thank you all and wish you a blessed Holy Week. Emily, Bruce, prayers for your ministry as it continues to unfold. Look forward to ways that we will be partnering in the weeks, months, and years to come. So
thank you.
Blessings to you all.